Certains jeux de mots et les idées qu'ils transmettent sonnent comme des évidences, et Enter the Gungeon est de cela. Sur le point de sortir après 2 ans de développement, le jeu de dodge roll n'a presque besoin que de son titre pour se décrire. Mais dans le doute, on a quand même demandé à ses créateurs de nous en parler un peu.
I like to call it a bullet hell dungeon crawler, and it is a roguelike, top-down radial shooter with procedurally generated levels and bullet hell style combat. That's pretty much how I go for it, but I like the words bullet hell dungeon crawler because it kind of brings it all together, but yes, it is a roguelike as well.
On parle d'un dungeon crawler Danmaku roguelike donc, c'est-à-dire un dungeon roller, si on peut se permettre de jouer nous aussi avec les mots, qui s'annonce on ne peut plus loquace en matière d'équipement.
So we have 190 guns, some of them basic, AK-47s or Uzis or whatever, and then some that are a little more ridiculous. We have a gun that is a unicorn horn and shoots rainbows out of it. We have called it a fossilized gun, and it shoots oil, and then when you reload, you light it all on fire. We have a mailbox that shoots letters, We basically have every kind of gun, and then a lot of weapons that just look like guns, and so we put them in because they are kind of shaped like a gun.
De l'autre côté de ces armes variées, on trouvera des ennemis en forme de balles. Et si ça peut paraître sorti un peu de nulle part, ça reste on ne peut mieux approprié à un Gungeon.
When we came up with the name Gungeon, it would be a gun dungeon. We thought, what would be in the Gungeon? And I had this idea of bullet guards, who were sort of guys wearing like bullet-style armor. And I tooled around with that for a bit. I tried making it work, and it didn't really work. And so then I just drew this bullet, and I put a face on it, And when I did that, everybody just really thought, that's the way to go, That's what we should do. And it is random, you're totally right, but we think it works for Enter the Gungeon.
Si son ambiance originale et décalée ajoute beaucoup au capital sympathie d'Enter the Gungeon, ce n'est évidemment pas le seul atout que le jeu avance quand il doit se comparer aux nombreux autres dungeon crawlers sortis ces dernières années.
What I like the best about our gaming comparison to some of the ones in our space is that I really like our boss fights. Like, I think that our boss fights are just, I think they're super interesting. They have they're really events. Like, even if you're good at the game, you have to be like, okay, I'm gonna fight the boss, because I think they all put serious pressure on the player, and they have multiple different attacks, and they require you to do a bunch of different stuff. And I think that our bosses are big events. And the reason I say that that's such a big thing for me is when I look back on all the games that I super loved, I think wow, they all have really standout bosses. And when I say that, I'm talking Dark Souls, and I'm talking Zelda and Metal Gear Solid. When you sit down with someone and talk about it, you're always talking about the Sniper Wolf fight, or the Vicar Amelia fight, in Bloodborne or something like that. And so I don't know, it was very important for me to make sure our bosses felt larger than a lot of roguelikes do.
Boss mémorable ou pas, la concurrence en matière de dungeon crawler et de roguelike est particulièrement rude depuis que ces genres ont connu un nouveau boom en même temps que la scène indépendante. Cependant, chez Dodge Roll, on n'y voit pas qu'un inconvénient.
Since we started it 2 years ago, we thought we got really excited by the idea. There was a few games that came out that really made us think and look at the roguelike genre in a different way, and those games were The Binding of Isaac for certain, and then also Rogue Legacy. And we had played Vlambeer's prototype, The Wasteland Kings. And so we were we started playing roguelikes. And when we went back to old ones like Shiren the Wanderer and Chocobo's Dungeon and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. And we were just thinking about kind of what we would do. And so at the time we were we really like these games. We're gonna make another one. We're gonna be part of the boom. But we also thought the game was gonna take us less than a year to make. And now it's been 2 years. So I feel rather than it being a boom anymore, it's almost just they're sort of here to stay, and we're going to be one of them. I don't think we're part of the rising action anymore. But I think that's fine, because I also think that a lot of the games that have come out in the meantime have prepared gamers for permadeath and difficulty and kind of the concepts that we were doing. And we've had some of the same ideas that other people did in tandem. And yeah, I think people will play the game, and it'll be a little bit more familiar than if it had come out right when we started, but I also think that more people will be interested because now they understand the genre better.
Mais si les Binding of Isaac et autres Rogue Legacy nous ont appris à gérer un certain degré de difficulté, Enter the Gungeon ne compte pas pour autant l'utiliser n'importe comment, et ne se privera certainement pas d'aider le joueur à sa manière, malgré ses pluies de balles intimidantes.
Our goal for the difficulty is to make it a hard game, but to also make it a game that encourages mastery. So, we give you the dodge roll, we give you the blanks, which are the bombs from shmups, that delete the bullets. And one of the things is, all the room, it is procedurally generated, it's procedurally assembled, but the rooms are hand designed. And the reason we did that is because we just played each room over and over again to make sure that I like to use the phrase, put pressure on the player, like make sure that they have to react quick and that they're maintaining constant vigilance, and skill, but not to just completely and utterly flatten them with bullets. It has to be possible, obviously. So that's why we went with the hand design rooms, because if the computer put two super hard enemies in the wrong place, you could really get stuck, and that would be, obviously terrible. So our goal is to make it hard, and when you beat a boss, every time you beat a boss, to have it be like, whew, that wasn't a cakewalk, but I get better and better. And then when you beat the game, I want it to be like, I want you to cheer, because you'll probably have died many times on the way. But there's actually, I think, a pretty cool system in the game that can help you. And it encourages mastery, which is if you beat a boss and you take no damage, you are guaranteed to increase your maximum health because you get an item called a master round. And what that does is, if you play the first level many times and you master the first boss, you're more likely to beat it without taking damage, and you'll get that master round, which means you have extra health, which means you survive longer later to master those bosses. So it's this nice, just get good at one thing and we'll help you a little along the way, and then eventually, hopefully, you get good at everything, So, yeah.
Derrière cette idée de progression dure mais assistée, il y a une certaine philosophie de jeu et un rythme qui donne à Enter the Gungeon un feeling très japonais, malgré ses origines on ne peut plus occidentales.
When we sit down to make the game, though, we don't go like, we're going to make this Japanese. It's just that out of circumstance, some of our favorite games in the world are Japanese. And I mean, Dark Souls is my favorite game of all time. And Dark Souls is an interesting AAA game because it is a game where when you press a button, you just do the thing. And in a lot of American games, there's this sort of cinematic, I don't want to use the word hand-holding, but I will. And whereas in Dark Souls, it's just attack is attack, and roll is you do the roll, and you have total control to either live or die. And that's something that we really respect in their game design. And also, obviously, it is part bullet hell game, which is, Japanese genre primarily. And I guess we just try to make the games that we like, and it just so happens that when I list you a bunch of my favorite ones, many of the ones at the top are Japanese, but I do think that there is somewhat of a Japanese feel, now that I think about it, because if I can go off on a tangent for a second, if you look at Ninja Gaiden, 1 and 2, those are both incredibly precise, extremely fast combat games, Japanese games. And if you look at Ninja Gaiden 3, it had sort of a more cinematic thing to it, and it didn't do as well. And I think that they were influenced by Western games, and maybe their audience was more attuned to that fast-paced, very precise feel, and that's something that we are, certainly,
Oui, on comprend tout à fait ce que tu veux dire à propos de Ninja Gaiden, Dave. Et d'ailleurs, on est complètement d'accord. Mais qu'est-ce que t'as dit juste avant?
And I mean, Dark Souls is my favorite game of all time.
Et il va falloir nous en dire un peu plus. Notamment sur la manière dont ces excellents goûts seront traduits dans Enter the Gungeon.
One of the things that is sort of hard to show when you only get to play it for a few minutes is that, the inspiration from Demon Souls and Dark Souls actually runs quite a bit deeper than just the dodge roll. For instance, the opening area that isn't procedurally generated, we call it the Breach, and it's directly influenced by Demon Souls' Nexus, or Firelink Shrine, I guess, from Dark Souls. But when you find NPCs in the procedurally generated area, and they're locked up in cells, and when you rescue them, they show back up in the Breach. And, you meet different characters, and it's nice, but what this is actually doing is an incredibly subtle amount of progression, because once you've rescued them, they can show up in the dungeon and offer you a chance to get extra loot. And extra loot means being more powerful in the run. but it's always like a chance for it, right? And you kind of have to do a quest for them. So the more people you rescue, the more likely that 1 or 2 might show up in a run, and then you're actually creating like a statistical buff, I guess, for you. And but it doesn't rob you of the skill thing. You're always starting fresh, and you have to really get good at the game, master the dodge roll and everything, but you get to kind of meet these interesting characters that you can also benefit from. And I think when players play for just a short amount of time, you don't see any of that. And when you sit down and you're like, okay, I'm going to learn this game, and you play every day for, a few hours or something, you start to, you'll notice that you're getting better, but you'll also realize that the game is sort of working with you to do it as long as you accomplish these side goals. And I think that that's a pretty elegant, solution to progression and but maintaining the fresh run of a roguelike, so.
Une approche élégante du roguelike, on ne demande qu'à le croire. Et à vrai dire, les nombreuses heures qu'on a déjà pu passer sur le jeu nous y encouragent fortement. Mais on en reparle très bientôt, autour d'une critique qui arrivera peu après la sortie d'Enter the Gungeon, prévue pour le 5 avril.